Rain pattered relentlessly on the metal ribs of Kestrel 9 station. The place was a hollowed asteroid, neon taped over its seams like bandages trying to make it feel alive. The official name of the port was a jumble of letters and numbers no human could memorize, so everyone just called it Rainwell. I, like everyone else, had learned to time my footsteps between the drips, but the station never lost. Water found me, settling on my jacket, mocking my precision. I sat at a worn synth coffee kiosk, my third cup of bitter regret in hand, scrolling through notices when a red flash caught my eye. Bonding protocol flagged. Report to Counter 7. I groaned. My idea of bonding extended only to my job and a long history of bad decisions. Counter 7 housed a floating administrative AI inside a glass cylinder, lights drifting like pollen. Citizen, it chirped, voice cheerful to the point of cruelty. Congratulations on your successful union. I blinked. I think there's a mistake. I haven't even successfully unioned my laundry. The lights swirled in amusement. Humor detected. Noted. Your bonding confirmation was filed 19 minutes ago. 19 minutes ago, I'd been arguing with a vending machine over why it thought my face looked suspicious. I turned and froze. She was leaning against the wall beside the counter, half shadow, half neon. At first, she looked human, familiar even. But then the details betrayed her. Her eyes caught the light and held it for a heartbeat too long, like reality was buffering around her. Beneath her collarbones, fine geometric filaments shimmered like star maps etched into skin. Her movements were precise, effortless. Her smile was practiced, just enough to seem real. You're the one they paired me with? I asked, my voice barely hiding my confusion. I believe the correct phrase is destined partner, she replied, soft and controlled. Or, if you prefer accuracy, clerical accident. I snorted. I like you already. That's unfortunate, she said. Her eyes flickered with amusement. It complicates my plan to remain unbothered. The AI insisted, relentless as bureaucracy always is, please confirm your identities for finalization. Refusal incurs a non-compliant surcharge. Surcharge. I repeated it like a foreign curse. For not being married. Correct. The station encourages social stability. I can't afford instability, I muttered. One late payment and I'd be eating protein foam for the rest of my life. She leaned closer. The air seemed to straighten around her, like dust decided to behave. A droplet slid down the ceiling, bent midair, and avoided her shoulder by a precise fraction of an inch. Nice, I said flatly. Even the ceiling respects me, she replied. The filaments beneath her skin shimmered faintly, like a secret blinking awake. Finally, we placed our hands on the scanner together. Warmth radiated from her, too perfect to be accidental. The kiosk flashed green. Congratulations. You are now bonded, the AI said. I exhaled. Well, I should probably learn your name. She met my gaze, the station noise fading as if it were listening. You may call me whatever is easiest, for now. For now, I repeated, tasting the words. I met her that night in a bar that smelled faintly of ozone and danger. Kestrel 9's ceiling was a hollowed asteroid, and the city wore neon like armor. My job was stupid simple in theory, retrieve a lost cargo tag, but the crate belonged to a syndicate that measured generosity in microns. She sat 2 seats away, silent, observing the chaos around her like she was studying a language. Her eyes held faint prismatic depths, and the filaments beneath her skin pulsed gently. She ordered a glowing blue drink that smelled like a threat. You're supposed to threaten it back, I said, joking despite my instincts. I will consume you, she said, dead serious. Not the drink, me? No, just the drink. But her voice carried authority I didn't recognize. By the end of the night, she suggested a temporary bond to exploit a bureaucratic loophole. My debts, her privileges. You barely know me, I said. 13 minutes of observation is sufficient, she replied. She called it efficiency. I called it terrifying. Days later, the Imperial Courier invited us aboard with armed escorts and subtle threats. Invitations on Kestrel 9 usually came written in blood or unpaid debt, But this one was elegant, smelling faintly of wealth. The chamber we entered wasn't a room. It was a living atmosphere, light, pressure, history folded into architecture. A council of masked attendants mirrored everything they saw. When I met a mask, I saw my own tired, scared face staring back. Succession integrity alert, one voice said, polished over layers of translation. Subject low. Subject. I interrupted. I prefer person. The attendants ignored me, focusing on her. You know them? I whispered. They know me, she replied, her voice quiet enough that only I heard. A small prismatic ring of light floated toward her, an identity veil. The throne cannot remain ungoverned, the attendant said. I laughed nervously. So, you're like a very important accountant. Her gaze flickered like reality was hesitating. I am the queen, she said, matter of fact. No, I said immediately. Queens don't sit in bars and ask about laundry. I asked because I wanted to know. I wanted one place where I could be only me. The council's tone sharpened. This union is unauthorized. The human is an exposure risk. She stepped closer, filaments beneath her collarbones brightening, forming a crown-like lattice. He is not a risk, she said softly. He is my choice. Choice. The word sounded like an explosion in the room. Yes. Choice, she repeated. Transparency. The bond will be acknowledged publicly, not as weakness, but as evolution. If the empire cannot survive a queen who loves, it deserves the fragility it worships. The room shivered. Somewhere deep in the ship, the apologetic voice murmured almost wistfully. They didn't imprison me. Instead, I was placed in a suite that could have been luxury if you ignored the invisible perimeter field humming like a bored insect. The bed adjusted itself to my spine. The walls offered calming vistas of oceans that may not exist. She entered like the room belonged to her, and perhaps it did. The lattice beneath her skin shimmered faintly. They want to annul the bond, she said. They claim it jeopardizes succession integrity. I laughed. I always suspected my personality could destabilize governments. They will offer you wealth, protection, memory edits, she continued. They call it mercy. I call it theft. I stood. So, what now? Run. Stage a coup. Learn to bow. Running makes you a target. A coup makes me what they already fear, a queen with a will. I exhaled. You could have told me earlier. I tried, she said quietly. Every time I opened my mouth, I heard titles instead of my own voice. I wanted one place where I could be only me. Her fingers touched mine. Warm. Real. The empire may have feared sentiment, but here, in that room, she reminded me that choice mattered. I realized the paradox she brought into my life, a civilization advanced enough to bend light into law, yet terrified of love and imperfection. What do you want? I asked. I want to keep you. I want the bond to mean what it meant in the bar. An ordinary promise made extraordinary by honesty. And the empire. An icon, she said. One word, heavy with threat and tradition. I laughed. Great. I always wanted to be classified as private desire. You make it sound romantic, she replied, a tiny crack in her composure almost smiling. The throne chamber awaited, a living atmosphere of history and light. The council of masks mirrored only her now, her crown of light faint beneath her skin. They will remove him, memory altered, containment ensured, the throne declared. Her voice cut through, calm and lethal. You will not edit him. The throne is compromised by fear. I am living proof that untouched things rot. I found my voice. I didn't marry an empire. I married a woman who argued with a drink and called my life fascinating. I'm not a symbol. I'm a choice she made. The chamber held its breath. Somewhere, deep inside the ship, the apologetic voice murmured again, softer now. Even the architecture seemed to side with us. And for the first time, I felt it. In a universe ruled by laws, light, and bureaucracy, love, messy, human, impossible love, had rewritten the rules. The corridors of the Imperial Courier were quieter than I expected. Not silent, there was always a hum, the faint vibrations of engines too precise to notice unless you were listening, but they felt alive in a way that made human nerves twitch. Every step I took was catalogued, measured, and perhaps even judged. My wife, the queen of an empire that stretched across light years, walked beside me like she had done it 1,000 times. But unlike me, she didn't step, she seemed to glide, and the ship moved politely around her, almost apologetically. "So," I began, trying to sound casual despite the weight of the suits of power and protocol that followed us unseen, "how often does someone just walk into their own throne room with a random citizen?" Her eyes, prismatic as ever, flickered at me. "Rarely," she said. Then her lips twitched, and I thought I saw the tiniest smirk. "And those who do are usually dead before lunch." I shivered, ignoring the heat of her hand brushing against mine. Not a touch, just a proximity that made the air feel warmer, like someone had turned up the thermostat in my chest. I swallowed and forced a laugh. Well, good to know I've started my reign on a strong note. The doors to the council chamber opened again, folding into themselves in a motion so fluid it made the metal look soft. I stepped through, my boots squeaking once, and felt the room shift. The air pressure seemed to compress slightly as if acknowledging my presence. The masks of the council members reflected my face, tired, bewildered, stubborn, exactly how I felt. They didn't know me. They didn't want to. But they were studying me anyway, like an anthropologist examining a species that could talk back. She stepped forward, and the filaments beneath her collarbones began to glow faintly, a lattice of light hinting at authority, but delicate, almost fragile. Even in that chamber, she was more commanding than any monarch I had ever imagined. The room seemed to bow, subtly, obediently. My own spine stiffened in response, but I did not kneel. That was not my style. "The human," said a voice, smooth, layered with technology until it was hard to know if it was one speaker or many, "will be removed. Memory altered. Containment secured." I raised a hand, a foolish, instinctive gesture. "Hi. Quick question. Is this the part where you pretend this is compassionate?" No answer. A few masks tilted, reflecting the faintest annoyance, like I had disrupted their well-oiled machine. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. My wife's hand found mine under the table, warmth spreading like a silent shield. "You will not edit him," she said, softly, yet every word carried the weight of a gavel. "He is my choice." The council's voice sharpened. "The throne cannot be compromised by sentiment." "Nor by fear," she replied. "I am a living proof of choice. A bond between two beings cannot be measured in terms of protocol, numbers, or compliance. If the empire cannot survive love, then it deserves to crumble under its own rigidity." I blinked. Love. Me. The word sounded ridiculous in that chamber of polished steel, light, and oppressive history. Yet, standing beside her, I felt it like gravity, subtle, unavoidable, but capable of shifting worlds. The silence stretched long enough for the artificial lights to pulse, uncertain, as if waiting for a verdict. Then a single mask tilted, a gesture so small it almost went unnoticed. And then another. Slowly, carefully, the council shifted, adjusting to the possibility that my existence, my choice, mattered. When she spoke again, it was quieter. "We will not be coerced. We will not be erased. Transparency is our choice. Let the empire see it." I felt my pulse slow, the initial panic fading into awe. She had walked into this room not as a queen hiding behind fear and tradition, but as someone who demanded a system bend for humanity. For me. After what felt like hours compressed into minutes, the council spoke again. "Compliance. Noted. Observation continued." I exhaled. Not safe, but survivable. I looked at her. That was impressive. She let a small, controlled smile slip. "I have been doing this my entire life. Negotiating, bending, surviving. You are surprisingly adaptable." I didn't correct her. Adaptable. More like terrified, holding on to hope with white knuckles. We left the chamber, and the corridors seemed to relax. The hum of the ship became familiar, like a living heartbeat. She led me through narrow passageways, past observation decks that showed stars my brain could not fully comprehend. Kestrel 9 was behind us, and yet, in some ways, it felt like I was already being carried into a larger, unknowable world. "Where are we going now?" I asked. She glanced at me, eyes bright with calculation and something softer, something human. "To see what happens when the bureaucracy meets reality. To explore how your life, your ordinary life, fits in with all of this." I swallowed hard. "You mean, where do I survive the Empire without dying?" "That, and perhaps find out how fascinating ordinary human choices are." We entered a small transport chamber. The doors slid shut with a sigh, sealing us in a cocoon of neutral air. She gestured at the seats, which mold themselves automatically. "Sit. I will pilot." I hesitated. "You, pilot? You're a queen, not a starship captain." "Authority is versatile," she said. Her fingers brushed the control panel. The filaments beneath her collarbones glimmered faintly, interfacing with the ship as if she was more machine than human at that moment. The hum beneath us grew stronger, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light. She turned slightly in my direction, eyes softening. "Don't worry. I'm excellent at practical matters." I laughed nervously, unsure if I was laughing at her, myself, or the absurdity of the situation. "You sure? Because I have a history of walking into disasters." "And I have a history of surviving them," she said. A soft challenge, a dare, wrapped in calm authority. The journey was silent except for the ship's hum and the occasional flicker of her interface lights. I watched her, fascinated. Every so often, a line of light would trace across her skin, a language I could not read but that seemed to pulse with intention. It was as if she was communicating with the ship itself, commanding it with nothing more than presence. The more I observed, the more I realized, she had power not because anyone gave it to her, but because she embodied it. I remembered the bar, the blue drink, the small, absurd conversations that had started all of this. Ordinary human life, messy, flawed, funny, was now intertwined with interstellar politics, fleets, and crowns. And somehow, she had chosen me to navigate that collision. Not for convenience, not for duty, but for choice. The ship slowed, and a new environment emerged. Not another asteroid city, not the cold metal corridors of bureaucracy, but a quiet world with soft green hills, rivers that reflected twin suns, and skies that seemed impossibly vast. The landing platform extended before us. The doors opened, revealing a landscape that looked both ancient and alive. She gestured toward it. "Your ordinary life, if you can call it that, exists somewhere out there. And yet, it now has an audience you never asked for." I stared, feeling absurdly small. I was hoping for a quiet life. She smiled faintly. "Quiet is a luxury. Survival is an art." The first step onto the planet was shocking. Gravity slightly heavier than Kestrel 9, winds carrying scents unfamiliar to my lungs, colors too vivid to ignore. I stumbled, almost instinctively, and she caught my arm. Warm, firm, steady. "You will learn," she said softly, "that ordinary humans carry extraordinary resilience. That is why I chose you." I looked at her, the light beneath her collarbones dimming but still faintly visible. She was both queen and person, authority and companion. I was both terrified and honored. "Let's start," she said. "You will show me what it means to be human." I laughed, the sound mingling with alien winds. "Hope you like laundry and debt notices." "Perfect," she said. "Those are excellent ways to measure ordinary life." And for the first time, I realized,